Tech Reimagined. Redefining the relationship between people and technology. Brought to you by Endava. This is Tech Reimagined.
Hello, I'm Bradley Howard, and this is part 2 of our Ada Lovelace Day celebration. Joining me are Chris Cooper-Bland, Group Head of Architecture at Endava, and Sue Charman-Anderson, the founder of FindingAda.com. Starting with Sue, can you tell me a bit more about your career background?
My career is a bit of an odd one, and I like to use it as an example to show that you don't need to have a grand career plan. You don't have to have it all worked out before you get to university, or even after you graduate. You can improvise as you go along, because I actually studied geology at Cardiff University. And then really struggled to find a job because there was an industry-wide hiring freeze for 5 years, and I graduated right in the middle of it. So there were just no jobs in industry. And I ended up working in science publishing for a few years. I ended up quitting that, and via a slightly circuitous route became a music journalist, because obviously, why would you not? Did that for a while, and then my uncle in Australia told me to start learning XML, and that the web was the way forward. So in around 98, 99, I trained myself to become a web developer, and then that was my entrance into technology, where I stayed until I left the UK in 2014. So I became a social media consultant, or a social technologist, as I like to put it, in 2004. Spent 10 years working with clients around the world on social media projects. And then when I moved to America with my husband, I ended up working on Ada Lovelace Day full time in 2015. I've done, that's been my focus since. So it's been an interesting career. I've heavily edited it. I've done a lot of slightly odd things that maybe don't get put on LinkedIn or on the CV. But I think that's a good thing. And I think it's really important these days that people understand that careers are not straight lines. There isn't a career ladder so much anymore. And that it's okay to experiment and do different things.
That's really lovely. And who's been some of the real key influencers, especially influential women in your career?
I think that's a really interesting question. My inspiration have been people that I don't know. They've been people that people like Ada Lovelace, or women that don't even exist. So fictional characters, where I've kind of just drawn inspiration from seeing how these characters deal with situations in fiction. The whole point of Ada Lovelace Day is to talk about inspirational women in STEM, and there are come to be sort of so many that it becomes hard to choose. But I'm obviously always going to go back to Ada Lovelace, and I think she's a figurehead for a lot of people for a good reason, and that is that she does embody the challenges that women go through, because having done this groundbreaking work on publishing the first complete elaborate computer program for Babbage's analytical engine, she's then had to deal with being sidelined, being told that she wasn't capable, she's not as good as men. Pushback against her as a figurehead really is based on a failure to understand what she did and how she did it, and a failure to look at primary documentation around her mathematical education and knowledge. So I think from that point of view, for a lot of women, and myself included, it's just like, she might be, it's over 200 years since she was born, but I really relate.
And something that intrigues me is, can you share some of the fictional characters that you are inspired by?
I was a huge fan of Anne McCaffrey, who is a science fiction fantasy writer. One of her characters, Lesser, who is a very strong but very intelligent, very thoughtful character, who is born into a situation of great adversity that she has to overcome. She's a favourite. And then also there's another character called Killer Chandra, who is in one of Anne McCaffrey's sci-fi books, who is essentially a crystal miner, And there's an awful lot in there about, again, having to overcome adversity and disappointment. And I think I relate to her because her chosen career of opera singer is ripped away from her very suddenly, and she's heartbroken about not being an opera singer. And my first career choice of geologist was, I'm not going to say ripped away from me, but it was not accessible, and there was no path for me into geology after I graduated. So I kind of related to that sense of not being able to pursue one's first choice and then having to find a different career. And I love both Lessa and Kilashandra. They're both very strong women that I really drew a lot of inspiration from when I was a teen.
And what advice would you give to the next generation entering the workforce, in particular young women interested in a career in STEM?
My personal sort of view on this is that there's an awful lot of careers advice out there about how to choose a job and how to, whether you should go for something that you love or something that's practical and all the rest of it. And actually, my most important piece of advice is just don't worry so much about having a grand plan. We live in such a challenging time at the moment. If you are looking for a job now, or if you are stuck in a job that you don't like, these are really difficult times for everyone. And you may feel as if your career plan is crumbling around you, but I promise you that there are opportunities that will be available that you can't imagine. When I was at university, blogs didn't exist. The idea of being a blog consultant, which is what I first called myself back in 2004, was a ridiculous idea. I got told so many times, like, no one is going to pay you to tell them how to blog. It turned out businesses really wanted to know. And actually they would pay me to tell them how social media worked. So the opportunities that are coming up over coming years, we can't predict now, but there's so much opportunity. So get yourself on the edges of disciplines that you're interested in and look for the overlap, look for what is fascinating to you, and the opportunity may be there to create your own job like I did. So long as you nurture your passions and nurture your curiosity, there will be interesting things to do.
So we hadn't planned this part whatsoever, but this is very topical. I've got twin daughters who are both 17. So they're in the upper sixth form. They're just choosing which courses to look into at university before they take their exams. So what advice would you have to them to choose their university degree?
University is an interesting time, and it's a time of, it's like a really big dichotomy. And that is, on the one hand, studies, your degree is important. You have to choose something that you're passionate about, that you're still going to be interested in at 11 p.m. on a Thursday night when you're still doing your set reading. But at the same time, university is also an amazing opportunity to expand your horizons, meet new people, try new things, joining clubs, go on trips, all of those sorts of things. So it's not a case of finding kind of like the one degree to rule them all. Pick something that you're genuinely interested in, because you're going to have to spend a lot of time studying it. And if you're not interested in it, that's going to get tedious quickly. But at the same time, balance that out with new experiences. And if you get to a point where you think, oops, I've kind of picked the wrong degree, make sure that you talk to people, talk to your tutors, talk to your careers unit. You are not trapped in a particular path. You can always change your mind.
Well, thanks for the personal advice. And over to Chris. Can you tell us more about your career background?
Well, a bit like Sue, really. I didn't have a grand plan, or certainly my plan didn't transpire. When I was at school, I was very keen on biology. I wanted to go to university and study biology and do research in biology. However, in the sixth form, I had some personal issues. my dad died, my mum had a nervous breakdown. I didn't do quite as well on my A levels as I should have done. So I got a job, an administrative job in an insurance office. After a year or two, I was thinking this really isn't for me. I need to work out what to do. And they decided they were going to get a computer. Oh my God. And the handwritten records all got transferred onto a PC, basically, very old and cumbersome PC. But I was talking to the business analyst who was helping write the program to computerize the records, and realized that this was really quite interesting. And she, strangely, her name was Sue. She was really encouraging, and she was saying, well, as we were talking about the problems and how she was going to, capture the requirements, etc., she said, well, you've got a really analytical mind. You would be good at this. So I actually applied to the civil service because they had quite a good training scheme for IT. And got into the civil service and was allocated to the Metropolitan Police Office, where I started working as a mainframe programmer, writing COBOL programs. Really progressed from there. The changes really have been tremendous. I mean, at that point, we were working on a new version of the operating system. There were so many new things to work out, to understand. And of course, learning was very different. You went on a training course and then you had manuals. That was it. There was very little sharing of information. There was no internet or Stack Overflow, no online courses. It was all down to trial and error, really, to try and make things work. So that's how I got into computing. And then I realized I was actually quite good at it and I liked it. I had still harbored an urge to actually, well, I'll do this for a little while and then I'll, go back to university and do biology. So I actually started an open university degree and then realized I was in computing as a career. So switched all my modules over onto the computing track. And actually got a degree in computing from the Open University. And then I did a master's as well in computing, and then an MBA in IT. So continued in that path. Then I got various roles, moved on from the civil service to actually work for a short time for ICL, the mainframe producer themselves. That was a very challenging project. I was very fortunate. I realized it was a challenged project and left and joined the company called Bax, who do the direct debits and direct credits for the UK. They've changed their name now, but they used to be called Bax when I was there, and had the opportunity there to work on fantastic systems because they're a small organization but provide very important systems. So the opportunity to solve difficult problems was very great, and actually make, deliver something that was of significant importance. And I worked there for 14 years, and they were very supportive. After that, I came and worked for Endava, and I've been with Endava for, again, 14 years. Gosh, I hope that doesn't mean I've got to leave soon. And moved up to be group head of architecture.
And what does that role mean within Endava now?
So what does the architecture discipline mean at Endava? Because we're spread across multiple geographies, we don't have a hierarchical organisation that focuses on how we do our practice of developing software. We have a matrix organisation that runs that to make sure we can get communication across the regions, focusing on the practices that people need to follow when they're developing large and important IT systems, basically. helping to grow people, working on sort of learning paths to make sure that people can get up to speed and understand the complexities involved.
And do either of you read business books? Starting with Sue?
Not really. I have a couple that I feel like I ought to sit down and read, but I don't know. For me, I get a lot of my inspiration and new ways of thinking about things by talking to people, people who are generally in very different areas to me. So I tend to feed my sort of creative side through conversation more than anything. Just recently, I've been doing quite a lot of academic reading of papers around gender equality, mentoring, that kind of stuff. I think business books can be interesting. I just don't seem to have the time to sit down and read them.
And Chris?
Some business books, I would say probably more IT books. I'm involved with an architecture association called IASA, who are a worldwide group of architects representing the profession, and I'm inputting into their ITBOC, their IT architecture body of knowledge, and actually we have a Friday call at 5 p.m. Which is supposed to be focused around what we're actually working on, but actually has this wide-ranging agenda and touches on many subjects in the architecture space. So that I find that really stimulating. And then we're reviewing each other's work as well. So certainly at the moment that's occupying my time. That's not focused on proper work, shall we say.
Wow. So you have a call every Friday at 5 o'clock to round the week off, where you meet with your peers in other companies.
Yes.
Wow, that's definitely devotion for you. Thank you both for taking the time to talk with me about the important subjects of diversity in STEM and sharing your advice and your stories. I hope you'll join us next time for another interesting discussion on the Tech Reimagined podcast. Please remember to like this podcast and hit the subscribe button.